Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. I play on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and PC. So you play as an elder vampire who has awoken from torpor, which is this slumber that they go into when they're staked in the heart. But it can also be extremely long, and you were in an extremely long torpor. When you awake, you find that you have been marked with a mystical symbol that kind of limits your powers, and with the voice of another dead vampire in your brain. That vampire being Fabian, who was previously a detective, but the two of you joined forces to essentially figure out what the hell is going on with you, what the hell is going on in the city, because it seems like there's some crazy stuff going on. You've got Thin Bloods, which are kind of lower vampires who are getting kind of restless, and then there's some other dark mystery stuff, and then there's some crazy stuff going on with the court being, the pure blood vampires who kind of rule the city. And I gotta say, at first and several times throughout the story, there were times where I was like, this seems a little generic. But then they would throw a nice little twist in there that would throw me off just a bit. But then they did some things that I also felt were kind of dumb and poor writing. There's literally a time where one of the villainous vampires uses their power on another vampire in front of you and another vampire to make the leader of the court give you orders. And it's like, we just saw you do this. We just saw you do this. And that just felt really lazy to me to set up for the next thing you gotta do. Because it's like, there's two vampires here who will fully acknowledge that you are using your powers on the leader. So that just felt lazy, and that was really frustrating for me at that time. But then, man, the game threw a huge twist at me that I just wasn't prepared for, and that's also partly my fault for not being prepared for it, but nonetheless, it was great and it surprised me. And it honestly helped pull me back in. I was about to shit all over this game's story because I was like, this ending's gonna suck ass because of this. This is a really dumb way to start wrapping things up. But then they hit me with a twist that, again, I probably should have seen coming. Didn't, though, and I appreciated that. Let's also address, there were some great characters in this game. I really appreciated a lot of them, and I appreciated the variety of personalities that you interact with. It's not quite as insane as some other games out there, but there were a good number, and it was enough to keep me engaged with the characters. But let's move on to the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is some of the characters are a little bit cheesy, but I think that's just kind of their personality. The rest of them are played much more seriously, and I think it works. Then you've got the music, which is completely forgettable. I don't remember it. I know it was there, and there are times where it's very noticeable when you're running around the city, which is appreciated, but at the same time, you're like, I don't know if it fits perfectly. As for the sound effects, I think the sound effects were good. I appreciated when you're running around the city, you get a bunch of sound effects of a city in winter, and I liked that. Admittedly, there could have been a little better ambient conversations, a little bit more of that, as well as I ran into an audio glitch because I did something turns out I didn't need to spend as much time on, but I was hunting specific blood types, and I'll explain that a bit later. But there was this weird glitch where I'd be luring a woman and she would be talking like a woman, and then when I would be biting her, it would suddenly be a man's voice, and vice versa that would happen. It was very strange. But overall, I didn't notice any missing sound effects. There were times where some sound effects were really muted, and that was kind of odd. They definitely should have hit harder and been louder. But let's get on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a first-person, small open world RPG, but the RPG elements are pretty fucking weak, quite frankly. And admittedly, I always play on whatever the default difficulty is, and this defaulted to the easiest difficulty, and maybe I would have liked a bit more of a challenge, and I just kind of didn't after a point. I always just kind of set it and go with it. Probably should have turned up the difficulty just a little bit. I only point that out because the difficulty I was on, all the fights were so easy, and while I did use my abilities, I really very rarely needed to. There were very few enemies where I was like, okay, I need to use an ability so that I can actually get some damage in. That happened with 5, 6 enemies throughout the game. The rest I could just basic melee. But what I will say is, looking at the abilities, there's a good number of abilities, although some of them, I'm like, this is kind of just a repeat of a different ability, just with some different effects around it. The combat is fairly basic overall. You've got a lot of grunt type enemies. You can feed on them in the middle of battle. You can execute them. You can do some sneaky sneak to take them out, or at least try to take them out quietly. I was not great at doing that. Then you got your big enemies. Then you got your special enemies who are faster, more guns, things like that, can actually fight better. And then you got your bosses. And like I said, on the difficulty that it defaulted to, none of them were a challenge. Otherwise, you spend a lot of time running around the city just kind of doing your main missions and your side missions. Your side missions could use a lot more depth. You have basically a few people who give you side missions, and 2 of them revolve around find this guy, kill him without breaking the Masquerade, and the other is take this or go collect this and deliver it here. But either way, it's get a package, deliver it. And those are your 3 primary ones. There's also a few things to find around the city, security cameras, graffiti, things like that, but it doesn't go too much more in depth than that, which is kind of disappointing. And I mentioned the Masquerade, but almost forgot to describe what it was. That's basically you need to keep your vampire cover so that the whole world doesn't know that vampires are a thing, and you break it by killing people in public, drinking blood in public, using your powers in public. But it also led to a weird glitch that I had a few times. Like, there were plenty of times where I did something that would break the Masquerade a little bit, but there was one time where, like, I went into full break out of nowhere. I had done nothing. I was quite literally at 0, crossing the street, and all of a sudden, full Masquerade break, cops are shooting me, people are freaking out, did nothing to warrant it. And it happened to me a couple other times, but for more minor degrees. That was the only time when it went full break, but that was an issue. And while it's not a huge open world, I mentioned, it's good enough size for what they're doing, but at the same time, you're like, you could have done a little bit more here, guys. You could have given me a few more missions. You could have given me a larger space to operate in. Now, I mentioned the blood types earlier. You've got to collect certain blood types because you go to other vampires to help awaken your elder abilities. And to do that, you have to have gotten, pink, red, or purple blood types and have a certain number of that, basically. Although I did kind of waste my time with that because the side missions, as you get further in the game, start to dump a lot more of that blood type points into your inventory, basically. I completed some of those missions and I was getting like 1,000 points, and then you're just like, oh, so I spent quite a time running around the city just draining people, and I probably didn't need to. I will say, though, I thought the main missions gave you a decent variety. There are times where you've got to go and track a certain blood type down for like an elder vampire in the city. You've got to kind of solve a mystery, do a little bit of investigation. Not too in depth with that, but they did some fun stuff with that. They also did some cool things where you get to experience some of Fabian's memories. So that was actually kind of nice, and it mixed up what was going on, and they eventually tie it all together. And I did appreciate that. This is similar to a previous Bloodlines game and a lot of RPGs nowadays, where you can make conversational decisions and they will impact how the story goes. They will impact your relationship with certain characters. I tried to be fairly neutral because I didn't fully side with anyone. I gotta say, though, just overall, the gameplay mechanics I felt lacked a certain amount of depth, and it was kind of disappointing to me. And as for the controls, overall, I liked the controls, though there were times where it didn't feel like it was necessarily doing what I wanted it to or needed it to. And that specifically came when I was climbing a vent and then trying to like scurry up a wall. Sometimes it'd work great, sometimes it wouldn't work for shit. Other times I'd be doing my telekinesis thing and it just wouldn't connect for whatever reason. There were a few times where it just didn't quite click. You're pressing the buttons and just not getting the reaction you should be. So that was weird, but 99% of the time it was working just fine. Now let's get into the graphics, and honestly, a little disappointed. I think they did some details very well, some details not so well. Like on some of the characters, like there's great detail, like they're just standing there kind of moving a little bit and their hair will move, and that's a cool little detail. But then at other times, things like facial hair just look kind of shitty. There's definitely clipping in the graphics in some crappy ways. There's definitely clipping in the environments in some crappy ways. Some of the animations and facial expressions at times, like especially in the final boss fight, there were times where you'd get a glimpse of your character and their facial expression was just, what the fuck is this horribly drawn cartoon on my character? Like it really was very noticeable because you're like watching your character and you're like, what the fuck am I seeing? Which is unfortunate because I do think there's an awesome variety in the characters. Each of the characters' designs really fit with who they are as a character. It also kind of fits with their clan because, different vampire clans, all of that jazz. And I think the city itself is pretty cool in its design. I do wish there were more NPCs, a better variety of NPCs. There's also a lack of certain small details, like in the snow there could be better details. Also, this game suffers from the whole Batman vision mode thing where you use it a lot and it kind of sucks away the world because, you know, it all becomes essentially one color palette when you're in that mode, which is always unfortunate when they design something cool, like a cool world around you, and then you have to use that shit so much. Now, as much as I'm bitching about that, I do think there are some really cool design elements, specifically like the effects around your powers. And some of the kills are super gruesome, but then some others lack detail in them. Like there's one where you like sweep them and like smash their face into the ground and like crush their skull. Super gory, super graphic, well detailed. And then there's one where you like rip their throat out and there's no detail to it whatsoever. You're like, you guys just didn't feel like putting that effort in? Which also comes to a lot of the items you find in the world and like notes and stuff. You pick up a note and it just boom. Immediately you go to a menu and that's where you can view it, view what it was about, things like that. But you don't actually see the note itself, which feels lazy. But I think my biggest problem from a visual standpoint is that this game lags a lot. It's trying to be one almost completely cohesive open world. There are a few areas where there will definitely be loading screens, but you go into the hotel, the Glacier Hotel, major landmark in this game. Every time you go in, it lags just a little. Every time you go out, it lags just a little. Get too close to one of those buildings, it lags just a little. Few too many enemies on the screen, it lags just a little, but not all the time. And it just happens a lot, and you do get used to it, but you shouldn't be getting used to it. It should just be nice and smooth. It's just unfortunate because there's a lot of things that feel kind of unfinished from a visual standpoint, but then there's things where they clearly put a good amount of effort into. Like as you gain your powers back from the different clans, you get outfits that kind of match that person's style or the clan style. And you end up with a ton of outfits, and I found one that I really liked and I stuck with it, but it's like clear that they put a lot of effort into that. So to wrap this up, I actually ended up enjoying the story far more than I thought I was going to, because there were times where it was just up and down. I wasn't sure if I was loving it or not. And there were times where I was like, I definitely don't love it. But then at the end, I actually really ended up enjoying it, which is unfortunate because the gameplay was more of a letdown and visually it just didn't feel complete. This game definitely feels like it suffered from being handed to a new developer and then another new developer, and I don't know if there was another one after that, but either way, it clearly shows that there was that issue and there was some development hell to this game, which is unfortunate. And while I'm not going to say that I don't recommend it, I think if you're a fan, I would recommend playing it, but probably wait till it's on sale. I do struggle to recommend it at full price. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, did you ever play the first Bloodlines? I did, I really enjoyed it, and it had one of the creepiest levels that you just weren't ready for. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.